is a blue sky day, and we are here today to commemorate John F. Kennedy. And
I'm going to stop here just for a moment because I'm going to give the intro. This is a talk given by Nancy Hopkins. She worked very closely in the intelligence branch of the U.S. Armed Forces. She learned quite a bit, and she's going to share some thoughts about her understanding that she came to learn in the U.S. Armed Forces, and she put it together in this book. You really should read this book.
And the consciousness and the energy that he was trying to make humanity aware of. One of the things that we're going to focus on today is John F. Kennedy's amazing speech about secret societies and this monolithic conspiracy that he had become aware of. And this is what he was trying to inform not only America, I believe, but the world, that we were facing back in the 60s, early 60s, monstrous machine that was designed to disempower us and dominate and control us, to put it in very simple terms. And today, I feel so blessed because I have Ava Moore as my co-host, and we're going to be interviewing Nancy L. Hopkins, who wrote an amazing book that I'm in the midst of reading, and the title of that book is John F. Kennedy and the Jesus Christ Connection. It is a fascinating read, and so I'll bring my co-host on, and then we'll bring Nancy on. Ava, how are you doing today?
I'm well, Tony. Thank you so much for inviting me to be on the show with you. It is an honor, truly. Thank you for the work that you put in to this show. I'm very excited. It's going to be an exciting day. Thanks to all the work and for your invitation. It's nice to belong to this group. This is where everything started for me, and it's very memorable to kind of come back to Wolf Spirit and be on a show here today in the spirit of all of the things that are what this planet is trying to anchor in a way of being that, you know, it means a lot to me to be here. Thank you, Wolf Spirit. Thank you, Dave Corso. And to have Nancy come on is very interesting because she is a woman that is, no fuss, no muss. She gets things done, and she's very much a team player. She rolls up her sleeves and dives in right away. She's been an amazing leader, and just how to ride these energies that are and have been building since October 2012, the 28th. The Mayan calendar. Things have increasingly gotten more and more bizarre. For me, I definitely feel very much like a mashup between Alice in Wonderland and Dorothy. At times I feel like I'm standing in the midst of an energetic hurricane, in the eye of it, watching everything flow around, and while I'm falling down the middle of it. It's like, oh my goodness. So to have people who are seasoned in energetics and also in this country, and the live gameplay that seems to happen between the different sanctions within the country, where one sanction, whether it be alphabet or military, Air Force versus Navy or CIA versus NSA or whatever, I don't know, but I can almost start to see how in real time things get built up very quickly and then deconstructed by the other side and rebuilt and then deconstructed. It's like, oh my gosh, this is bizarre. It's so hard for me once I started to see this to get my footing, energetically speaking. So being with a very amazing crew that has come out of Wolf Spirit Radio as my foundation has been a godsend. So I am very honored to be here today, and I'm grateful, Tony, because you were part of that team that brought Bill in as soon as he came out. So a big thank you to Wolf Spirit Radio and to yourself, Tony, for having me, and I'm really glad you're here.
Thank you so much, Ava. And this has been kind of an interesting day to try and juggle a couple of things, because what this particular 1 hour show is about is, and I'm very adamant about this, is that what happened on November 22nd, 1963 at 12:30 Central Time in Dallas, Texas. I was actually living there. I was only 3 years, 4 months old. And I remember, I didn't have the consciousness to really understand what had happened. But, it's part of my history, and that I knew something really, really, really bad had happened. And I actually spoke to my mom earlier in the week, and just to do some fact checking, and it was very interesting, some of the information that she told me about what she experienced on that infamous day. And it actually was something that absolutely compelled my folks to move from Dallas, Texas, because of what they were witnessing. And what's really important to me today, and what I'm going to do today, is that we're going to have this interview with Nancy Hopkins, and we're going to use the first half hour for Nancy to explain how she came into the information that she has got. That's quite astonishing, and her journey through her life and how she gathered this information. And she's been an amazing researcher. She was part of the military-industrial complex and in the intelligence community, went to a super spook school, in quotation marks, and so she has an amazing foundation to give us information that she can derive from. I would also want to mention that we have a very good friend of mine, Dava Peters, sorry Dava, that has some very interesting and fascinating financial information, because there has been this group of people very hard at work to take down this financial cabal, and it seems that they're making some headways. That will be later on at the end of this hour. This first hour part of the show is from 10 to 11. At the bottom of the hour, we're going to be playing JFK's very famous Secret Society speech, and then we'll close the show at the top of the hour, and then we come back on at 1 to 3 o'clock. We'll probably go to 4 o'clock if Dave lets us, for the second part of the show, because there's a great deal of information that we are trying to get out to people so they can understand what was stolen from us. This consciousness and this energy of awareness of what we face that John F. Kennedy was trying to inform us about. So, Dava, can you say hi, and then we're going to go and introduce Nancy.
Hi, Tony. Thanks so much. I just had to unmute my mic there.
Yeah.
I'm really excited to be here and have some very, very groundbreaking news to share relative to all of this that's going on. And I can hardly wait. And I can hardly wait to hear what you've got lined up. This is just the most incredible thing. So I'll talk to you later.
Okay, thank you so much, David, for joining us.
Bye.
Nancy, welcome to Spirit Quest. I scarcely know where to begin. I'm in the midst of your wonderful book, John F. Kennedy and the Jesus Christ Connection, and going through it and trying to gather all this information and all these notes of your amazing life path and some of the synchronicities that just lined up for you and showed up. It's a fascinating book, because you speak of the cosmic reality. Is that there are energies, there are forces that if we set I'm looking for the correct terminology, kind of the intention and our heart and our mind in the right place, certain things happen for us that take us down this path of purpose and
well, yeah, that's what I was going to say, Tony, is, we have almost, in this time, in this day and age, we have the collapsing of polarities. And Nancy, you've done an amazing job documenting some kind of tips on how to navigate the collapsing of duality, the collapsing of timelines into a singularity. And what better day than today to, yes, we're commemorating. Yes, on some terms, things were stolen. Yes, on some ways, it is solemn. But if we are in the potential of absence of duality and reclaiming into a synergy, Nancy, could you kind of talk about the cosmic rules and how to apply those in the idea of reclaiming the consciousness that Kennedy was working so diligently to bring into the collective of the United States and also the world, and partnering with other countries? Is that maybe a good place to start, Tony? Do you like that idea?
I would like to get into that after his speech. What I really would like Nancy to do is to kind of give her life journey, just highlighting the high spots, because it's fascinating, that journey and where it took her and the synchronicities of that journey, because it was almost as if, at least, and this is just my take on what I read, is that Nancy, you had amazing experiences that literally directed you, and you had major decision points that just showed up, and it was very clear to you. So could you go into that? And thank you so much for joining us, Nancy.
Thank you, Tony, Eva, Wolf Spirit, Diva, and the radio network out there that we're trying to connect with. My story is one that began when I was 15. It began, in about 20 minutes.
Yep.
It was a generation of children who had been brought up to believe certain things. I can't believe I'm getting this emotional. This is very
wow.
I've been, it's like I started counting down at midnight. And I'm sorry I'm getting this emotional, but maybe we have to, because a child and a generation of children, in 12 hours' time, they were going to go from children to adults because somebody decided to kill a man. And what I want to do right now is to read you from the book what happened in that instant, not just to me, but for a generation that grew up to be the generation of the 60s, a generation that is now in its 60s and is still, I can tell you, absolutely pissed off. Because everything that we were, now, 20 minutes later, different, completely. The world changed in an instant. So right now, please give me the time, I hope I can get through it, to tell you what happened to me and to a generation. The man who had been from my state, the state of Massachusetts, the man whom I had campaigned for, the man who represented every dream I had been taught to honor, the very embodiment of everything I had been taught to admire and desire, the war hero, the religious man, the good father and husband, the wealthy and charismatic President of the United States, was dead. Someone had shot him. Someone had shot and killed the president. That's what happened. And from that moment on, my life was dedicated to understanding, why did you kill him? Why did you destroy my dreams? And as Tony was explaining, it was like, and as Eva has pointed out, there's an energy field all around us. And all it wants to do is answer questions. And because my questions were so very focused on one moment in time, 50 years ago, my life just took turns and twists. People would say something to me, I'd find a book, that led me to answers. Now, they're not the same answers that other people have come to, and it doesn't matter if they're right or I'm right. What we have to think in terms of is, what has it done to us as individuals? Where did we take it? And in my case, I just started, remember this was before the internet, and I just started to research every magazine, every newspaper. I'd go to the libraries, I'd try to find out what the stories were. And by the time I was a sophomore in college, I had a file that was 1.5 inches thick. And I went to a talk by a guy who he was against the Warren Commission results. He was going from university to university disputing the Warren Commission. And I asked him, I said, well, what about the third bullet? And he said, what bullet? And I said, well, the third hole, the one that was in his back. And he said, what are you talking about? And I said, well, and I pull out the file, and I've got notations in the file about 2 FBI agents, their report that I got from a newspaper, I think from Chicago. And it said that these 2 FBI agents were in the autopsy room in Bethesda when Kennedy was being autopsied, and they said that there was a bullet hole in his back, about 5 3/4 all down from the neck, and that when Humes, the autopsy surgeon, tried to probe it, it was like a puncture wound. It was not like a hole, and this was confusing to the FBI. The problem was never in the Warren Commission. It was never mentioned. It was never talked about. So I tell this guy, and this guy goes off and does his thing, and I go off and I do my thing. And very shortly after that, I realized I couldn't find my Kennedy file. But I was having trouble in school. I was a kid, and I just figured, okay, I've misplaced it. And it's sort of like I never much thought about it anymore. What I found out much later, 10 years later, as a matter of fact, the guy that I had talked to that day that was talking against the Warren Commission, 2 weeks later was dead in a barroom brawl in Boston. Now, what I think happened is that they were following him, heard me tell him this, knew that he would talk about it, stole my file, figuring a sophomore is going to forget about it, and that's exactly what happened. But David Lifton did not disappear. And David Lifton went into the case by a strange way in that he took Humes's, the autopsy surgeon Humes's testimony, and he brought it to a neurosurgeon, and he said to the neurosurgeon, not telling him what this report said, where it was from, he said, can you tell me what this means? And the neurosurgeon read it, and he said, well, I don't know what this is about, but this apparent autopsy surgeon is saying that he didn't say the president, he said that the body, when it got to the autopsy table, that the brain was already autopsied. Now understand that the surgeon who was responsible for the Bethesda autopsy, in testimony to the Warren Commission, in such technical neurosurgeon words that nobody understood it until David Lifton had a neurosurgeon translate it, was saying that when he got the president's body, the head looked like it had been autopsied. And this is the basis for Lifton's theory that the bullets came from the front, that there was somehow, they stole the body and changed the trajectory from making it look like the bullets came in from the front, that they punctured or put holes in the back of his head, in the back, thinking that the neck wound was that they were trying to fix the neck wound by this weird puncture. It's such a bizarre story that you go, no, this can't possibly be. However, and again, this is where fate comes into the picture. I was watching the television for all that time between Friday when he was assassinated and then after the burial, and they stopped on Monday doing all of the non-stop television. And I guess I was in charge of the television, and at that time you had to walk over and actually turn the channel. And there was only 3 channels, and I kept going back and forth and back and forth. As soon as they started repeating themselves, I'd go to the other channel. So I'm on this channel, and I do believe it was CBS. And they're talking. They're outside of the Bethesda hospital where they're going to do the autopsy, right outside the autopsy room. And there's these two commentators are standing there waiting for the president's body to be taken off of Air Force One and transported by hearse to Bethesda's hospital. And while they're out there, they start, and I wish I could depict to you, you're looking at the building, and you're looking kind of far away. It wasn't like you were up close. And all of a sudden, from the left-hand side of the screen, there comes an ambulance. And the ambulance backing in very slowly, and the doors are open, and a casket is taken out of this vehicle. And the commentators are talking about it. They said, wow, this is really strange. What is this ambulance doing here with this casket? Well, that casket becomes critical in Lipton's discussion because he believes that that was actually the casket that had the president's body in it. So again, the reason that I went with Lipton was because life had manipulated me to put me in a position to actually see that second casket. And the story goes on. I don't know how far into this do you want me to take you, Tom?
Yeah, this is an interesting aspect as well, because I accidentally ran into a video last night when I'm doing all this research. It's been an amazing couple of days. Is that television was very, very important in this entire construction of the lie.
Yes.
That they were selling us.
Yes.
And what is fascinating is that there was actually a
but
blurb on
then again, all
several of the news
mediums
where they were talking about
that they invented
how the president
would have been
was
utilized that way.
and sometimes he got away from a Secret Service agent, and this is what had happened to President McKinley, and this is how he got assassinated. This was right before they were filming the motorcade that John F. Kennedy was in. I mean, this was minutes before they started filming that entire process of the motorcade going through Dallas. So this is what is called predictive programming. Is they're setting the people up to accept something that they would not normally accept, which I found absolutely diabolical yet fascinating.
That was when he left at the Dallas airport, when
Yes.
he went over to the crowd that was at the fence. I've heard that.
Right, and
it's a very bizarre thing. I mean, when you hear it, you go, why did he go there? It was very strange.
Right, but it was
commentator.
Yeah, it was the setup to prepare the people for something bizarre happening, and I found that fascinating. Also, television being a programming tool, which I think more and more of us are becoming very, very aware that that's exactly what it is. So we have about 5 minutes before we're going to run JFK's profound speech and warning to the American people and to the world. Is that, could you give us kind of like a 5-minute collapsed version of your journey through the intelligence community? Well, how you got into the intelligence community, because back at 15, that kind of started your journey into the synchronicities that really steered you towards the intelligence community.
Right, well, I never stopped looking for the answers, and it became obvious. Well, anybody who has ever really studied the assassination comes away with something that I'm sure the plotters never intended. No. And that was you walk away knowing there's a secret society. You cannot look, I mean, you can find it in all sorts of ways. The mafia, you can find it in the oil companies. I mean, a secret society is an organization that keeps secrets from everybody else. And that is the critical element, is that all of a sudden all sorts of people who've been studying it went, wait a minute, there's something very dire and devilish in what's happening here. And people were waking up because of the assassination. It forced them to analyze data that we weren't paying any attention to.
Well, and I see it much like 9/11. There's this similar like energetics to impact both shock, like that whole shock and awe campaign.
Yes, that's how they manipulate your brain into listening to whatever dribble they're giving you as an explanation, because the human brain is breaking down under the impact of something so horrific, and then somebody says, no, it happened this way, it was a lone nut. Oh, okay, thank God, it's a lone nut. But those of us that looked at it were starting to find the secret society connections. Now, in my case, what I discovered was that Lee Oswald was working for the Americans as an agent, an intelligent agent. He was not the shooter. He was aware of it. He had already stopped it in Chicago. He was attempting to bring in a team that would stop it, but he didn't understand the full depth, because at every layer there's another layer and another layer and another layer, and it's all maintained of secrets, and everybody knows a different lie, a different version of reality. And so what happened is that as I got deeper into this thing, I discovered a connection to the key to explains why most people, when they say, oh, it can't happen, how could after 50 years all these people keep the secrets? Well, in fact, there's been a lot of people that have not kept the secrets, but the average person has not been informed. But the reality at the time was, I asked the same question. That was one of the first things I looked at. Well, how could all of these people, the Secret Service were implicated, certainly the Sheriff Department of Dallas was implicated, you've got the CIA implicated, the FBI, you've got all of these different groups implicated. What was the connection? What brought them together so that they will willingly conspire to keep secret the assassination of the President of the United States? And to make a long story short, it turned out to be Freemasons. And from Freemasons, I was led to Nazis. And anybody
that was a fascinating link in your book, is that these secret societies, the Freemasons, the Nazi Brotherhood, they came to the U.S. under Operation Paperclip, and how they embedded themselves, and probably previous to World War II, but they had already embedded themselves within the Masonic Society. And there's also the aspect of, yes, the Jesuits, the Vatican, some dark factions of the Vatican, and the Rosicrucians. And Dave, I would like you to spin up at this point this sacred, energetic point of, in 2 minutes, is when John F. Kennedy was assassinated. Would you please spin up his speech so we can honor him, commemorate him, and bring back into the consciousness and the energetic field the awareness and the energy that was stolen from us. Thank you so much, Dave.
Ladies and gentlemen, the very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society. And we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings. We decided long ago that the dangers of excessive and unwarranted concealment of pertinent facts far outweigh the dangers which are cited to justify it. Even today, there is little value in opposing the threat of a closed society by imitating its arbitrary restrictions. Even today, there is little value in ensuring the survival of our nation if our traditions do not survive with it. And there is very grave danger that an announced need for increased security will be seized upon by those anxious to expand its meaning to the very limits of official censorship and concealment. That I do not intend to permit to the extent that it's in my control. And no official of my administration, whether his rank is high or low, civilian or military, should interpret my words here tonight as an excuse to censor the news, to stifle dissent, to cover up our mistakes, or to withhold from the press and the public the facts they deserve to know. For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means, expanding its sphere of influence, on infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections, on intimidation instead of free choice, on guerrillas by night instead of armies by day. It is a system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations. Its preparations are concealed, not published. Its mistakes are buried, not headlined. Its dissenters are silenced, not praised. No expenditure is questioned, no rumor is printed, no secret is revealed. No president should fear public scrutiny of his program, for from that scrutiny comes understanding, and from that understanding comes support or opposition, and both are necessary. I am not asking your newspapers to support an administration, but I am asking your help in the tremendous task of informing and alerting the American people. For I have complete confidence in the response and dedication of our citizens whenever they are fully informed. I not only could not stifle controversy among your readers, I welcome it. This administration intends to be candid about its errors. For as a wise man once said, an error doesn't become a mistake until you refuse to correct it. We intend to...
That's one of the snippets that we loved about that man.
Accept full responsibility for our errors, and we expect you to point them out when we miss them. Without debate, without criticism, no administration and no country can succeed, and no republic can survive. That is why the Athenian lawmaker Solon decreed it a crime for any citizen to shrink from controversy. And that is why our press was protected by the First Amendment, the only business in America specifically protected by the Constitution, not primarily to abuse and entertain, not to emphasize the trivial and the sentimental, not to simply give the public what it wants, but to inform, to arouse, to reflect, to state our dangers and our opportunities, to indicate our crises and our choices, to lead, mold, educate, and sometimes even anger public opinion. This means greater coverage and analysis of international news, for it is no longer far away and foreign, but close at hand and local. It means greater attention to improved understanding of the news, as well as improved transmission. And it means, finally, that government at all levels must meet its obligation to provide you with the fullest possible information outside the narrowest limits of national security. And so it is to the printing press,
Narrowest limits of national security.
the keeper of his conscience, the courier of his news, that we look for strength and assistance, confident that with your help, man will be what he was born to be, free and independent.
Message that John F. Kennedy was trying to give us. And thank you for this very solemn, commemorative moment. And I hope that we can all carry this in our consciousness, in our awareness, and in our heart, that he was trying to empower us to be aware of these forces that are acting upon us, and that we do, if we live in truth and speak the truth, we can overcome this monstrosity. And my feeling is at this point, we are now down at the end of the road, and something must be done. And we begin doing that by telling the truth and carrying the truth and trying to help other people to see this truth. And the amazing process of growing spiritual awareness is that once people can see this, and this has just been my experience, and I've talked to Nancy about this, is that I have found that I'm living in two worlds, and I believe at this point we're transitioning from one dark world to a brighter world, and sometimes that's very difficult to see. But there's an amazing work being done that a lot of people aren't informed about at this point. But this movement was also prophesied by many different cultures that humanity will transcend the darkness, and we are in the midst of this right now. We are at a tipping point. So we're coming to a very powerful, energetic state that it will become time to choose what we embody. Nancy, please continue with your information and your experience.
Well, let's see. He truly was an amazing orator. And a lot of people don't know that he also was the only president to win a Pulitzer Prize for Profiles in Courage. It was a small book, but it was written about different men in history that he admired. And for all of this stuff you hear about John's personal life and his womanizing, he was full of faith in human beings. The man won the election because he was a war hero. And let's just go back for an instant and think about what kind of a world we're talking about. The Nazis had killed 6 million people in a theory that at the time I was writing about this and studying about this in the 70s and 80s was unheard of. Nobody knew about this. And, you know, I talk about taking yourself to the brink of the rabbit hole and then jumping in. I began to find indications through a book called The Sphere of Destiny, which was written by Trevor Ravenscroft. And that book depicts a Germany that was based on occult belief, on mysticism, on the concepts of reincarnation, and the belief that there would be a Messiah to lead the German people, the Aryan race, to their rightful ownership of everything that is. And Ravenscroft knew this guy in Britain, and that man was attempting to write his own story but couldn't quite do it, so Ravenscroft wrote it for him, and that became The Sphere of Destiny. Now that was another weird thing. It was a friend of mine that brought a stack of books that had been donated to the library over to me and said, we don't have room for these, but they're metaphysical subjects. You want them? And I said, yeah. So she puts them on the desk, and a couple of days later I pick them up, and one book flies across the room. I'm not talking like drops out of the stack. It flew across the room. It was 3 feet from me. And I said, whoa, why is this so energetic? And that was Ravenscroft's book. And it set me on a trail to understand the occultism of the Nazis. And to be honest, at that moment in time, which would have been 1974, I didn't believe in occultism and secret society. I had no clue that any of that existed. The Sphere of Destiny is a story that is in of itself a very long and mystical kind of story. But at the root of it is this Nazi philosophy that there are powers inherent in human beings that remain untapped. And Hitler was always talking about getting these supermen, these superheroes, these super beings. Everybody thought he was talking about, Aryan heavyweights. No, he was talking about metaphysical properties that the only other maybe there's others, but the one that fascinated him the most was the powers demonstrated by Jesus Christ. And this is where you get the connection between Jesus Christ and John Kennedy, is that I believe the Nazis did not simply disappear after Germany. That there's thousands and thousands of Nazis, SS, top of the line, Aryan perfect people that disappeared after the war. And it wasn't just I can't remember the number, but I think it was around 1,500 scientists that came over with paperclip. It's not just limited to them. There was 20,000 Nazis that disappeared. Where did they go? Well, I think that they did. They came to the United States and other places, and that they integrated themselves into the superstructure that was here. And at that time, you're talking right after the war, you're talking the oil companies, you're talking international bankers, you're talking about a lot of the manufacturing of the cars, and everything is starting to really crank because it's still working off of the war industry of the time. And then in the middle of it, you got somebody comes up and says, hey, let's build these nuclear plants. And I've always been suspicious of this because anybody that does any kind of logical research realizes this is insanity. And yet, all of a sudden, there's this massive building of nuclear plants. And it turns out that the company that was building most of these is called the Bechtel Corporation. And it's a secret society in that you don't know who works there. This was back again in the 60s. I think they've gotten it so that there's more illusionary stuff out there, like that you really know what they are. It's all secret, it's all BS. But the company itself, every time you saw somebody that worked for the company that ended up in the U.S. government, they all had German last names. And I said, well, this is really interesting. And then I found out that Bechtel was the company that was building all these nuclear things. And I'm thinking, man, if you've got all this dirty money, and you need to clean it up, but you can't clean it up in oil or industry or things that are already there because your co-workers there already got those things. Well, how about you just clean it up in the nuclear industry? Now, this seems to take us away from what we're talking about with Kennedy, but the reality is that Kennedy knew things about where we were going, especially within the concept of the space race. Now, the man was a visionary, and he could see things that were happening that other people couldn't. And I don't think it was because he had better intelligence. He did have better intelligence, but I also...
He was a Gemini.
I also believe that he was being guided to certain information in the same way that I was guided to certain information. And at the time, let's just for a minute again, just to understand the man a bit. He got in, the speech that we just heard was in April of '61. He had become president in January. They had the Bay of Pigs, which was an attack by American forces to recapture Cuba. There was a lot of it was mostly Cuban forces that went in, but it was directed by the CIA. So, and it got burnt bad. It really did. There was a lot of uproar about this. So now he gives in April the speech about the secret societies, and you're going like, well, now what's this about? Okay? So then you have, get to October of '62, okay, 18 months later, and you have the Cuban Missile Crisis. And if Kennedy wasn't there, I don't think any of us would be here, because there was a push for the nuclear war. It was like they're all on a suicide net, and the only person there who had some kind of a mission to survive was Kennedy himself, John himself.
Well, I would love to hear a little bit about the ties also between his June 11th speech in 1963, where if he had insight to all of these Nazi...
Stop right there, Nancy. Yeah, we don't have any sound.